After dropping off 5 cases of Mountain Dew to the nearby food bank, I begin the video smack dab in the middle of Jefferson Barracks Park. This park is a large one in South St. Louis County as it borders the Mississippi River, along with the CDPs of Melville and Lemay. Obviously, the park gets its name from the Jefferson Barracks, which happens to be the oldest military installation west of the Mississippi River, as it was first established as early as 1826. So wow, that means that we're coming up on the 200-year anniversary. Well, it goes without saying that the barracks are named after our third president, Thomas Jefferson, as he died during the same year that the military post opened. Jefferson had also obtained the land that the barracks sat on through the Louisiana Purchase, so at the time, it seemed fitting to name the new military post after him. With that said, we're going to start the video with talking about the history of the Jefferson Barracks, as originally, troops at the Jefferson Barracks tried to help keep peace between Indian groups and the new European settlers, as Indians would often get aggressive with the new settlers and vice versa over things like land and hunting rights. Troops from the Jefferson Barracks ended up battling during the Black Hawk War of 1831 and 32, which then led to the formation of the United States Regiment of Dragoons at Jefferson Barracks in 1833. This group ended up being the first permanent cavalry unit in the U.S. Army, as it wasn't until after the Black Hawk War that Americans discovered just how vast the western frontier really was, and having the cavalry unit allowed troops to travel much quicker. As we're driving past, you'll see that this park has several museums, including the Jefferson Barracks Ordnance Museum No. 4. No word on if there's an Ordnance Museum No. 1, 2, or 3. But you also have the Jefferson Barracks Heritage Museum, the Missouri Civil War Museum, the Jefferson Barracks Powder Magazine Museum, and the Jefferson Barracks Telephone Museum. Anyway, back to the history timeline, as the cavalry unit that I was explaining was redesignated as the 1st Cavalry in 1861, and the group partook in many battles, including the Seminole War, the Mexican War, the Civil War, the Spanish-American War, and other Indian expeditions in places throughout modern-day Oklahoma, Kansas, and Iowa. Not gonna lie, don't know what that first building was, but maybe some of you will, and you can let me know down in the comments below. The second building, however, is the Powder Magazine Museum, and the third is the Telephone Museum. Alright, well, during the Civil War, there were many notable war generals and leaders who were at one point or another assigned to Jefferson Barracks, including names such as Ulysses S. Grant, Robert E. Lee, and Zachary Taylor. Additionally, the Jefferson Barracks National Cemetery is the resting place for over 200,000 veterans and their family members. And of course, the entrance to the Jefferson Barracks has a nice display of war memorabilia to remind you of its history. The truth is that you could talk for hours about the history of Jefferson Barracks since there is such a long-lasting legacy here, but that's not going to be happening in this video. Today, the site continues to be an active military installation, and like I've mentioned, there are quite a few museums here to say the least. So if you're a Civil War buff and if you're ever in the St. Louis area, you should definitely make sure to come and visit Jefferson Barracks Park. It's a great place because if some in your party get bored and Civil War history isn't their thing, you can tell them to go take a hike on some of the nature trails. That way they can go chase down some bunny rabbits and squirrels, and if they're successful, that means that you won't have to pay for dinner that night. And maybe you can reward the young bucks with some Mountain Dew that you bought from Walmart. Just a suggestion. I guess I'll mention a few more things about the Jefferson Barracks that I left out earlier, as the site was discontinued as a military post in 1946. However, since then, the site has continued to be used by both the Missouri Air National Guard and the Missouri Army National Guard. In 1950, the U.S. government conveyed a tract of the land to be used as a historic park, and in 1971, Jefferson Barracks County Park and all of the buildings within were placed on the National Register of Historic Places. So that's all good and dandy. Moving on now, as soon we'll be heading into the CDP of Lemay, but first, just north of the park is Notre Dame High School, which is a Roman Catholic private all-girls school. The school was first established in 1895 when the School Sisters of Notre Dame founded Sancta Maria in Ripa High School. Just past that, along the riverfront, you can see the River City Casino, which actually sits on the grounds of an old lead manufacturer called the National Lead Company. Despite employing many, the plant was controversial as the National Lead Company faced many lawsuits over sulfuric acid emissions. The state of Missouri, however, says that the site has been cleaned up, in which those efforts paved the way for the construction of the River City Casino to be completed back in 2010. Speaking of the National Lead Company, their facility along the banks of the Mississippi River employed many of the working-class citizens of Lemay back in the day, which describes the blue-collar feel of the area as we continue to head through. Another industry included the National Brick and Quarry Company. The National Lead Company operated at the confluence of the River Des Peres and the Mississippi, which is actually a pretty significant site historically speaking for Lemay, as not only was it the site of a lead manufacturing company which made it heavily polluted, now it's cleaned up and a casino sits there, but it was also where the first settlement was in the area as the French Jesuits came through all the way back in 1700. They didn't stay long, though, as from here, the French Jesuits traveled south towards Kaskaskia, Illinois, which, by the way, was the first capital for the land of Lincoln. Not to mention, the Mississippi River has also changed its course since the state boundaries were established, and these days you can only access Kaskaskia, Illinois, via car from Missouri, as today there isn't a bridge over the Mississippi River connecting Kaskaskia to the rest of Illinois. Anyway, you can find a video on Kaskaskia and find out more about it by clicking on the link in the top right corner of the screen. Growth picked up in the late 1700s in the area that we know today as Lemay. This was mostly due to the strong development of Carondelet, which today is a neighborhood of St. Louis. Back then, however, it was a French settlement that was established in 1767. The area that we know today as Lemay actually used to be called Carondelet Commons, and it was separated from Carondelet by the River Des Peres. The area just south of the River Des Peres was initially used to harvest timber to be used as fuel, fencing, and for profit by selling it at local markets. The area that would eventually become Lemay started to form an identity between the Civil War and Great Depression eras. Land disputes occurred here for a long time before they were able to finally settle things around 1900. Tensions were high over how to properly form municipalities around here, as the Germans who settled in the area had already established other communities such as Luxembourg, Ivory, Bismarck Heights, Longwood, and Bobringville. And of course, all of those communities are now within the modern-day Lemay. The name of Lemay, however, comes from a Carondelet pioneer family who used to operate a ferry service across the Merrimack River in the 1800s. The first time the name was used was in 1909, when the St. Louis and San Francisco Railroad built a train station here and called it Lemay. In 1936, the community was officially labeled as Lemay, as a new post office was constructed here with that name, and at that point, it didn't matter if anyone was upset if their place wasn't called Luxembourg, Ivory, or Bismarck Heights, because Bismarck Heights would be more like Forgotten Heights at this point. But yes, ever since 1936, this place has been called Lemay, and it's remained as a census-designated place, or a CDP, ever since. Meanwhile, we've been driving along Broadway, which is the furthest east, north and south thoroughfare through Lemay, and the blocks along Broadway happen to be the oldest parts of Lemay, being built anywhere from 1890 to 1930. Moving on now is when it comes to the modern-day economic stats, it kind of resembles that of a South Side St. Louis neighborhood, which is fitting, as Lemay has the look and feel of a South Side neighborhood as well. About 17,000 people live here today, and the median household income is $53,000 per year. Only 19% of adults 25 and older hold a bachelor's degree or higher, and the median value of owner-occupied housing units is $113,000, while the poverty rate is 14%. My takeaway is that with smaller and older housing taking up much of the inventory, it shouldn't be a surprise to see that low of a median home value. It's also typical of these older blue-collar communities across the Midwest to see a lower-than-average rate of college graduates. Moving on to the crime rates, you can see here that the violent crime rate in Lemay is about double the national average rate, while the property crime rate is 3,000 for every 100,000 residents. So if you want to live here and maybe bring your family along too, you might want to go sign everyone up for some karate or jiu-jitsu lessons. Also, if you're going to be buying a new car, make sure to select the ugliest color option available and get the cheapest set of rims. However, chances are that people who are looking to settle down in an area probably aren't looking at Lemay first. They're probably looking at some other suburbs within St. Louis County. However, if you do have a family and you are looking to move into Lemay, you might find some peace in knowing that niche.com rates the schools as a B+, which is a better score than what I was expecting, given all of the other stats that we've seen. Lastly, Area Vibes gives Lemay a livability score of 70 out of 100, so definitely not terrible and not great. We're actually now in the city of Bella Villa. St. Louis County is weird, as it's full of these smaller cities, villages, and CDPs, more so than other metro areas of similar size. So much so that it can be confusing to those who end up being new to the area. There's also patches of land throughout St. Louis County in between all of the villages, cities, and CDPs that are unincorporated, and in those areas you'll see St. Louis addresses, even though they could be nowhere near the city of St. Louis. Anyway, in the case of Bella Villa, it could be weird to someone that's new to the area, as someone could easily think of Lemay as being its own city, whereas Bella Villa would then be thought of as a CDP, since it's much smaller than Lemay. With that said, the population of Bella Villa is only 757, down from a peak of a whopping 1,000 people back in 1970. Alright, well, another thing to mention about Lemay would be the spring flood of 1973, which absolutely devastated the community. But before we dive into that, I'll give it some context. It doesn't flood often in Lemay, but when it does, it's not a wimpy Mississippi River flood, no. When floods occur in Lemay, they occur off of the raging waters of the almighty River des Peres. Don't get it confused. Because through Lemay, the Mississippi River is 379 feet above sea level, while the River des Peres is about anywhere from 379 to 390 feet above sea level. However, most of Lemay is safe from flooding, as most of the community is built on higher ground, no lower than 400 feet above sea level. However, there are some neighborhoods and some streets that are in close proximity to the River des Peres that are below 400 feet. So, about the spring flood of 1973. It's noted as the worst flood disaster in the history of St. Louis County. What's weird about this flooding event is that it didn't happen because of a crazy amount of rain in the St. Louis area. It was actually a flood that started down in Mississippi and Louisiana, where the Mississippi River rose 36 feet. So, maybe the Mississippi River isn't wimpy. Maybe it's the Mississippi that's the almighty river, while the River des Peres couldn't handle the backflow. Well, since the water was so high down in Mississippi and Louisiana, it kind of backed things up as water was heading downstream, and with all the levee systems in place along the river, water that was supposed to naturally just flow downstream couldn't do it anymore, and it had to go somewhere. So it started to head upstream along the River des Peres. The flood forced 200 families to leave their homes, and the area saw 22 miles of county roads destroyed by the flooding. There was also a major flood in 1993, so 20 years after the one in 1973, but the one in 93 was actually caused by excessive rains in Missouri, and the same situation happened where backflow came up the River des Peres and flooded streets near it. So if you're looking for a home in Lemay or maybe even the far south side of St. Louis, you might want to stay away from the river Des Peres. To the right is Hancock High School, home of the Tigers. Hancock High School is a part of the Hancock Place School District, which is one of the oldest school districts in the greater St. Louis area, and it serves the CDP of Lemay. The district is named after Union Civil War General Winfield Scott Hancock, who lived in Lemay and was once a presidential candidate, losing to James A. Garfield. You might have seen this earlier, but to the right you have a mock St. Louis Arch, which is a local landmark for Lemay, and currently it's being used for the signage of a Schnuck store, along with a Dollar General and a couple of other stores within the strip mall. In this video, you've seen the Jefferson Barracks and the Jefferson Barracks Park, in which you've learned that Jefferson Barracks has significant history with not only Civil War and World War II era stuff, but it even goes back before that, as it's the longest running military installation west of the Mississippi River. Pretty neat. And you saw how the community of Lemay is an older looking community with a blue collar feel, and it resembles the time when it was developed, as there was a lead manufacturing facility right along the Mississippi River, which is now of course, the River City Casino. Well, with all that said and done, I do end the video here. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to drop a like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already, as doing all of those things helps these videos destroy the evil monster that is the YouTube algorithm. Also, make sure to hit that notification bell and select yes, so that you can be notified every time that I upload a new video. If you enjoyed this video, then you might enjoy checking out some of the featured playlists on this channel. Videos with amazing insights on other places like what you saw here can be found in my St. Louis Suburbs playlist or in my Missouri playlist. Last but not least, if you can't get enough of me on here, you can always go follow me on my other social media accounts, and those links are below. We'll see you next time. Peace.